Part 6. The Apocalypse Theorem. At precisely 9 in the morning, on July 1st, 1946, the skies above Bikini Atoll were devoured in flames. A brilliant ball of light burst forth from the sea surrounding of the tiny, hitherto insignificant island, and rocked the stars before giving way to ash and pitch-black smoke. Ships were destroyed, debris hurtled through the air, and through the pristine island lay miles away from the epicenter. In a single moment of blinding light, it was rendered uninhabitable. The U.S. government had just conducted a test of a nuclear bomb. They considered it a total failure. Colonel Paul W. Tibbets, an advisor to the operation, blamed the atomic bomb's lack of complete destruction on the crew, saying they must have simply missed their target. This is unsubstantiated, but Colonel Tibbets would know a thing or two about this. He was the man who first wrought nuclear war upon the world. Now, to be clear, the issue of nuclear warfare is heavy and complicated, and far more people than Tibbets had parts to play in its realization on August 6, 1945. But it was Tibbets who piloted the Enola Gay, named for his mother, into the skies above Hiroshima that morning, and it was Paul W. Tibbets who would let the bomb drop and see from the safety of his cockpit the enormous mushroom cloud that enveloped the city after. So the man is clearly no slouch when it comes to nuclear weaponry. He is one of only 2 people to have ever unleashed a nuclear weapon in wartime, after all. So perhaps we should take him at his word that the crew in charge of dropping the test bomb in the waters off of Bikini Atoll that day did miss their target. But what they missed isn't the interesting part. It's what they hit. The Apocalypse Theorem is a theory which is so absurd on its face that I would not blame you if you dismissed it out of hand at first encounter. It's an uncomfortable prospect for some, though it is far from untrodden territory when it comes to theories about children's media. A similar theory has been popularized surrounding Disney's 1992 classic Aladdin. Editorial note: this theory is stupid as it pertains to Aladdin, but that doesn't mean that it can't be applied to SpongeBob Squarepants. What if the reason why nothing about the geopolitical world of SpongeBob Squarepants makes sense is that the residents of Bikini Bottom themselves are unsure of what the structure is? What if those allusions to Atlantis are more than low-hanging fruit pop culture references, but hints at a more sinister backstory than any of us could have possibly assumed? The Apocalypse Theorem is this. There was, once upon a time, a powerful sea kingdom, perhaps Atlantis. Then, something happened. That kingdom was destroyed by a cataclysmic event, typically attributed to an atomic bomb. This atomic bomb wiped out the societal structures that had been previously built, and no one really knows who's in charge right now. There had once been a king, but his ability to rule over his domain has been devastated. His own household guard has been decimated after the aftermath. This is why King Neptune sought out a fry cook in Neptune's spatula. He must have lost his best cooks in the explosion. This theory explains as well the discrepancies between Bikini Bottom and the surrounding towns. Rock Bottom appears to have taken the brunt of the toxic blow. Its streets are sparse, and those who have survived are still dealing with mutations caused by residual radiation. The clean, modern city, shown briefly in Pizza Delivery, and the sophisticated high-rise buildings of Tentacle Acres are located far enough away from the blast to have escaped the level of destruction Bikini Bottom has had to endure. The fish people in this world are clearly capable of sophisticated modern construction. But Bikini Bottom isn't as fortunate. It is little more than a wasteland. It is a shrine to the devastation of a nuclear apocalypse. Mr. Krabs lives in the anchor of one of the sunken ships. Bits and pieces of metal sank into the ocean to be turned into the city's new center. Whatever life existed before the blast, there bears no trace of it now. Despite the outlandish nature of these claims, several elements of it actually bear concrete evidence in favor of it. For example, the fact that Bikini Bottom lies in the waters below Bikini Atoll is essentially confirmed. Footage of the explosion has been used in the show, and though the iconic island is often shown to be above the surface, it is not a carbon copy of Bikini Atoll, it evokes it in several ways. The island is tiny and uninhabited, containing only a pine tree bearing coconuts. This is intentional. The word bikini in Bikini Atoll does not refer to the two-piece swimsuit. In fact, this nuclear test predates the innovation of the bikini by a decade. It comes from the Marshallese word pikini, which means coconut place. That the single defining feature of the island is a tree with coconuts, and that the creators have used the video of the Bikini Atoll explosion several times, are correlations which are far stronger than anything the previous two theories have to offer. Bikini Bottom is definitively located beneath Bikini Atoll. But it does not stop there. The presence of Goo Lagoon helps strengthen this theory, as the first atomic bomb dropped upon Bikini Atoll landed in a lagoon itself. Perhaps this strange beach within the ocean is a tiny silver lining amongst this backdrop of nuclear disaster, a phenomenon created by being directly beneath the bomb's blast, perhaps named for what it did to the surrounding waters. In Band Geeks, SpongeBob mentions the presence of toxic waste dumps, yet we don't see any kind of nuclear power in the world of SpongeBob. It follows then that the community is well aware of the disaster that befell them, and has been working throughout the years to remove the most toxic radioactive material to a safe distance away from the city. And what other explanation can there be for the existence of such supervillains as the Dirty Bubble? His name is even suspiciously close to Dirty Bomb. We can even see mutations, probably due to nuclear fallout, extend to the main cast. Squidward, despite his name, is canonically an octopus, yet he has 6, not 8 legs. No wonder he's so cranky. I feel obligated to bring up the tentative connections between SpongeBob SquarePants and T.S. Eliot's famous poem, The Wasteland. Some say you can find subtle references in the show to Eliot's work, most often in the second section of the sprawling epic. A line describing a drowned Phoenician sailor, whose pearls were his eyes, is ascribed to Mr. Krabs, who lives inside an anchor, which could be a sign of a shipwreck, i.e. the drowned sailor, and whose daughter's name is Pearl. Perhaps more compelling is the mention of the one-eyed merchant, which has been attributed to Plankton. There are more passages which have been cited as potentially referenced in the show, though they only get more tenuous from here. I'm including these two for the sake of thoroughness, though to be clear, while the Apocalypse Theorem is quite compelling, this particular bit feels quite like a stretch. Literary allusions aside, the argument this theory presents is clear. Disorder is order. The structures of power are so blurred because what has once been a stable society has been shaken by the fires of nuclear recklessness. Neptune is a king de jure, but a king without a kingdom. He roams the seas aimlessly, looking to replenish his own royal guard before he can effectively reassert control over his old dominion. Meanwhile, the cities which once knew him as their monarch have been left to their own devices, struggling to survive in their post-apocalypse. Neptune has become more legend than ruler, a being to be worshipped but not necessarily obeyed. It is a society teetering on the edge, plagued by radioactive supervillains and forced to scavenge bits of broken metal for shelter. It explains the lack of power structures, the architecture, the society, and the choice of location. There is one final bit of evidence that, rationally speaking, is a simple coincidence, but one in such a cosmic sense, one so incredibly specific, that it's almost like watching the universe laugh at you. It's as though the show has been telling us all the truth of its backstory since the very first episode, knowing it would go over everyone's head. The advisor to the Bikini Atoll atomic tests was named Paul W. Tibbets. Steven Hillenberg's co-executive producer, a writer and storyboard artist from the show's earliest days, and the man he trusted most to helm the show once he stepped down, was Paul Tibbet. I am not the first to put this theory forward. I will not be the last. But I do believe that I have put in the most attention to detail, the most rigorous logical examination of the concept so far written. The usual tropes of this theory do not quite sit right with me. This vision of a dystopian post-apocalypse, nestled within a show which preaches optimism and levity at every turn, is just too much to bear. Hello? Adventure Time? Of course, the grim nature of this theory is part of its own appeal. There's something so fascinating about a backstory so sinister for a show so positive and upbeat. Adventure Time? You ever hear one of these songs that has happy-sounding music but dark lyrics? Adventure Time? And beyond simply entertainment, this kind of backstory would make sense strategically for the show's creators, as it allows them to seemingly contradict their own lore on a whim. Consistently inconsistent, you might say. The Apocalypse Theorem has taken hold as the most prominent theory lately, and you can find more people asserting its validity pretty easily through Google. But, just as has been the case with the other two theories, it's never quite sat right by me. As intriguing as it may be, there's always been something wrong with it I've never been able to articulate. I do know that it is wrong. It has to be wrong. Yet how? On the surface, it explains everything. There is a finite amount of information available on SpongeBob SquarePants. It is not an impossible task to learn everything there is to learn about it. If we were only to count the first 3 seasons, then one could watch every episode in under 24 hours. Then again, it takes much more than a single watch to appreciate everything about the show. How many jokes went over our heads as children? How many references to pieces of literature and pop culture did we miss? In order to know everything there is to know about this show, we must dive deeper. It is difficult, but it can be done. Animated TV, especially a cartoon of SpongeBob's era, typically runs at a rate of 24 frames per second. Additionally, each drawing will appear for 2 frames, meaning that there are about 12 different drawings a second in an episode of SpongeBob SquarePants. Extrapolating this over 3 seasons, totaling 60 22-minute episodes, we reach a total of 950,400 total drawings used in the show's first 3 seasons. If we were to print out every single one of these drawings on sheets of printer paper and stack them on top of each other in a single tower, it would rise 311 feet in the air, higher than the Statue of Liberty. This is our Babel. Within this tower lies the entirety of information available about our accepted canon. Sift through it all, and you will find your answers. Do not lose a single page. Do not let Babel fall. Read and memorize every single paper. If it seems like it's not coming to anything, tell yourself it doesn't matter. Just keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going.